Okay, recently I was speaking to a multi-clinic practice owner down in the South. He's got 2 locations and feeling a little bit frustrated because he wasn't growing as fast as he wanted to. And after seeing some of the owners posting in our Ring the Bell about their revenue wins and their profitability wins, and then also some owners were getting more space, he's like, well, I want to open up a 3rd location by the end of the year and potentially be on track to open a 4th one next year. But I can't do that right now because I'm feeling stuck. Okay, so if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll show you exactly where his constraint was, how we were able to remove it, and then what we did to be able to solve it. Okay, so hi, my name is Dr. Robert Wilkers here, one of the co-owners at Rehab CEOs. Previously, I had 3 private practices, and I sold 50% of my shares back to my partner in 2021. And now we run an 8-figure agencies for physical therapy practice owners that includes coaching, marketing, staffing, and hiring support. So for this owner in particular, I leaned in and I said, hey, so what do you think your number 1 constraint is? And he goes, well, the reason we're not growing right now is because we simply need more leads, right? And he's like, well, that's what I hired you guys for, is to get me some more leads. I was like, great. So I was like, okay, well, let's look and see if leads are indeed your problem. Okay. So here's a practice owner. He's got 2 locations. He's at 7 FTEs, so full-time equivalents here. So he's got more than 7 providers, but we just kind of tallied them up. A full-time equivalent is 40 hours of work. We had 7 of those. He's doing around 60 slots here. So if you take 7 times 60, we're going to be hit with 420, right? So we got about 420 slots here total for the week. He's rocking around 80% clinic efficiency. So not terrible. We'd like that to be around 86, 88. And then ultimately he's got 198 active patients with about 30 evals coming in with a length of stay of 14, right? So all in all, kind of looking at the numbers, I always like to kind of plot just like this. It's like, well, how many active patients do we need to fill the schedule? And then how many new patients do we need coming in to match our churn? Okay. Specifically for our bigger guys. So this clinic in particular has 420 slots here. If we're seeing patients twice a week, then he would need about 210 active patients in order to fill his schedule. And right now they are at 198. Okay. So there is a little bit of a deficit here. Not terrible, but there's about 12 minus 12, and I'll put this in red. So there's like a small deficit here. Okay, great. Now, the other thing that we're looking at from a new patient standpoint is like, do we have enough new patients coming in to be able to match our drop off or churn? And drop off is just simply like every couple of visits, someone's going to fall off the schedule. Okay, we call that length of stay, right? So length of stay is just total visits divided by your evals. And in his case, he had the national average, which is around 14. Okay. So if we take, again, 420, so let's go ahead and switch back our colors here. So if we go 420 and we just divide that here in particular for this owner, we just take the 420 and divide it by 14. He's going to need about 30 evals. Okay. In order to, so he needs 30 evals right now, in order to match his churn. Right? Which, by the way, he's got 30, right? And he's getting 30. He's a little short here. But if you think about it, what typically happens is he's short by about 12 to 15. So in order to get full, he needs to be up at this number. But the fact that he's at about 198 kind of puts him down here, right? So he's kind of in this like circle of sameness, right? He's not able to grow because he's not even, first of all, he's not even really able to be full. How do I know that? Because he's only at about 80% efficiency, right? He's got about a 15 patient deficit. He's bringing in enough to match his churn, but he doesn't have enough to be full yet. And he doesn't have enough to be able to grow. Okay. So if we're looking at this thing, let's kind of start over with some of the numbers. If he was going to grow, right? And if I was going to kind of like, we're going to act like a lobster here and get him a bigger shell, I would almost want to figure out what are these numbers here for if he had 8 FTEs, okay? 8 FTEs. So let's take 8 times that by 60. He would have 480. So I would actually need him to be at about 240 active patients to grow to the next provider, right? And then ultimately, if he's at 480 divided by 14, evals would need to be about 35. Awesome. Okay. So what we want to look at for him is in order to grow, right, I need to make sure we get him from, 198 to about 240 active patients. And we need to take him from 30 evals to about 35 evals, put new patients here, right? New patients here, and that's kind of his growth deficit, okay? And you guys could play around with your numbers at home, because ultimately there's like, what do you need to fill your schedule right now? And then what do you need to become oversubscribed, right? So it's just like whatever, like oversubscribed is just basically like if I was to bring on another provider and I'm overstaffed, like what does that look like, right? So you want to play around with those numbers. So for this owner in particular, right, we have +5 evals here. Oh gosh, right, what is this? So 240 minus, so that's 42, right? And we got like 42 active patients here. So he's gonna need like an influx of around 47 new patients, right? Which sounds like a lot, but just this is why, like when you're doing the numbers here, you put numbers on it and you're like, okay. And then ultimately he would just need, like once he gets this initially, then he just needs an additional 5 more new patients to keep him full. Okay. So what we did for this owner is, we kind of a couple different systems in place. There's going to be your reach, which is, how are you getting leads on the front end? There's going to be your reputation, right? Like what are we doing on the back end here to be able to keep patients, right? So eval, progress note, graduation, past patient return, right? So we figured out a registration. And then there's this thing in the middle here, right? There's this thing in the middle. And ultimately what happens here, this is your registration. So first thing I always look at whenever I'm kind of breaking down systems and stuff like that is I always want to kind of look at the like the data or the scorecard first. So we always want to look at your scorecard. Then what we want to do is we want to look at your setup, right? Because setup matters. And this clinic in particular was set up proper. Setup, by the way, is going to be your like scorecard is your data. Setup is going to be like, well, I'm doing one-on-one for an hour, but I'm only making like 110 a session, right? So probably need to raise you up to higher revenue per visit to stay out, one-on-one for an hour. If not, we would just switch you to like 40-minute scheduling or something like that. So that's more setup. Hours of operation, stagger scheduling. So that's what we look at. Then the next thing that we want to look at is staffing. Interesting. Okay, so we got staffing here. Then we look into systems. And then the last thing we're going to look into is more star performers running the system, right? Staffing is more your ratio. Star performers are like, do we have the right people? So in this situation here, yes, he was getting about 30 new patients per week. And his solution was, we just need more leads. Okay, great. So I want to walk you guys through this really, really quickly. And we hear this a lot where it's just like, I just need more new leads, which is fine. And you can see here that like, he would need a lot of new patients. So he's going to need a lot of leads. So the first thing that we want to look at is we want to look at their data and more specifically their front office scorecard. And then we want to look at their marketing scorecards and stuff like that. So we have found that this specific clinic, when it comes to like some of their Facebook ads and different things that they were running, they were less than 30% conversion. So they were like, they had so many leads coming through their clinic. Their front office felt overwhelmed. So it came up like, my front office feels overwhelmed. So it's like, my front office is overwhelmed. They're not really converting well, but we're going to just slam them with more leads, right? So it didn't really make sense. So I want to show you this. So let's say this clinic needs 10 new patients. We'll just keep the math really simple, right? So from a lead to eval, right? They need 10 new patients. Now, if they have a 10% conversion rate, they would need 100 leads per week to get 10 new patients. Okay, everybody see that? Like 10 divided by 0.1. All right. So if you need 10 new patients and you have a 20% conversion rate, right? So if you take 100 here, or excuse me, 10, and just divide it by 0.2, like you are going to be at 50, right? You need 50 leads. And then if you're at 30%, you're going to need about 33 leads. 40% is going to be about 20. Let me just make sure I'm good on the math there. Divided by 0.4. Yeah, it's 25. Perfect. And then if you're at 0.5, you're going to be at 20. And then if you're going to be at, let's do one more here. 10 divided by 0.6, you'll be at about 17. Great. Okay. So this will be 40% conversion rate. This is 50. This is 60. Now, some people even have higher than this. I mean, we got clients doing 70 plus. So when you're looking at this thing and you take 10 divided by 0.7, like now you're down into like the 15 range. We'll just kind of stop there. Okay. Now, the reason why I tell you guys this, check this out, right? And this is what we did for this owner, right? When we were talking to him, like, so if you plot all of what we just talked about here on a graph, right? It's going to look like this. You're going to need 100 leads. So there's a hundo. Then you're going to need, let's go down here to 50, right? So 50%. Then you're going to go down here to 33. Then you're going to go to 25. And then you're going to go to 20. And then you're going to go to, what do we say, 17. And then you're going to go to 15. Interesting, right? So your line graph looks like this. Okay. So the reason why we tell practices that you at minimal need to be at about 30 to 40% conversion rate is because look what happens here, right? So we're kind of like in this area, right? This is kind of like the sweet spot. Now, granted, could you be more than this? Absolutely, right? Absolutely. Usually when you're like more than this and you're at like 50, 60, 70%, usually you're underpriced. So you can raise your prices here. But we want to be able to get you back into this 30 to 40%. And this is for all leads, by the way. This is Facebook, this is website, this is SEO, this is everything. We want to be at minimal 30 to 40%. But if you're Facebook, if you're only at like 10 or 20, usually it's a skill issue, right? And this is where we want to clean this up as well, because we want to be right around that 30, 40%. Now, our in network clinics, people that have been around a while, that's where you get that 60, 70, 80% conversion. But at minimal, we want to be at about 30 to 40%. Why? Because look at this. It's just like, you know, there's a delta here of 100 down to 33, right? So that's 67 leads difference. Now, the difference between 33 and 25 is 8. The difference between 25 and 20 is 5. The difference between 20 and 17 is 3, and then 2. So like there's really not a huge difference between this and this and this and this. So that's why like 30 to 40% is like, hey, just get into that level here and you are solid. Anything less than that, we have a front office issue. Okay, great. So what was this owner at? What was this owner at? This owner was like at 16%. Okay, so why does that matter? Well, we just said that this owner needs about 40 leads to be able to fill, plus 5 new leads to come in. So they need 45 new patients to be able to come into their clinic. And they have 0.16 conversion rate at their front desk. Yikes, right? So here's an owner that if you take 45 divided by 0.16, they would need 281 leads. And let's just say they're paying $15 just on Facebook to get these leads. They would need to spend $4,000 on ad spend in order to get the amount of new patients that they need in order to fill their calendar. Crazy. So first thing that we wanted to look at is the first and foremost, the main constraint that they have, right? We got scorecard, we had staffing, we had, scorecard setup staffing, and then we had systems and then star performer. So what we found is that they had a staffing issue, okay? So this clinic in particular had a PT, and then they had an admin, and then they hired another PT, then they hired another PT at the one location, and then their next location, they had a PT and an admin, they had another PT, and then they had another PT as well, and then they had another PT, and then they had an office manager that kind of was over both of these locations, okay? So they had 3 admins here, based on their company setup. Now, the thing that's interesting is the reason that they had such a low conversion rate is because ultimately when you have 7 providers, possibly 8, they're doing 60 slots in 60. So what that looks like here for this clinic in particular, so they had 7 times 60 would be 420. And then 8 times 60, because remember we're planning for the future, is 480. I want you to take both of those numbers there as a CEO and just divide it by 110. And why 110? 110 is actually going to be our ratio for how many front office individuals do they need in order to handle the amount of deal flow that they have coming into the clinic, okay? So this clinic right now needed 4 full-time equivalents. They only have 3. And then in the future here, they need about 4.5, potentially 5 to be able to grow to that 8 provider plus. So it wasn't necessarily that they had like a lead conversion issue. That's why we want to look at staffing first. So first thing that we did is we hired these guys a PCC, but more importantly, we wanted an office manager at clinic 1 and we wanted an office manager at clinic number 2, because there's got to be someone there to be able to manage, right? Hire on board, train, and manage. So this is where we hired somebody, and then we wanted to put silos in place here for an office manager PCC combo at 1, office manager PCC combo at 2. They didn't really need this weird office manager running both locations yet. Usually we see that at like clinics 3 and 4, where you'll bring in like more of a regional manager. But in this clinic example, like we wanted to make sure their staffing needs were met. Then the next thing that we did, which was really, really interesting, is we wanted to look at a system, right? So we got leads, we want to intake, schedule, and arrival. We call this Lisa. Like, have you seen Lisa? So when we started to work with them, we noticed that because they lacked the manpower or women power to be able to do this, they weren't able to get leads, right? Their biggest thing right now is they were getting like, let's just say 100 leads into the clinic, and they were only getting like 10 of them onto an intake call. Of the 10 that got to an intake call, 9 were able to get scheduled, and then 8 of them actually arrived for their appointment. So their main bottleneck here was like, how do we clean this up? Okay. So first and foremost, the easiest ways to get leads, right, onto an intake call is going to be something called speed, right? Speed to lead, which is really, really cool because the graph is the same. It looks like this. It's just like in the first 30 seconds, the first 5 minutes, the first 10 minutes, and then 30 minutes plus, right? So what do I mean by that is the conversion rate goes down significantly the longer that lead opts in before someone actually gets in contact with them. So that's why when we're looking at this thing, we need to make sure that we have automations. Now that they have AI agents, we have, right, some of that stuff. We put these stuff in place specifically through our GHL and high level and some of the stuff that we're using, some of the tools to be able to get people, right, to not call a lead or anything and pretend it's like AI, but to at least engage with the initial conversations, and then a human will take over. Okay, so that was the first thing we did, staffing, and then we put speed to lead into their clinic. The next thing that we did, okay, was on the intake call, we wanted to make sure we gave them a script. Okay, so this is going to be the key first. So first is going to be speed, then it's going to be scripting, and then this is where we gave them our patient framework. And what that is, and I'm not going to cover it too much here, but patient framework, or here I wasn't sharing my board, but we got script here, and then we got the patient framework. And this is to get intake to schedule. So how do we do that? So patient stands for purpose of the call, agitate the problem, transition to the goal, intensify the goal, emphasize the cost of inaction, present new opportunities, and then transition to scheduling. That's it. Okay. So we want to make sure we go deep into their personal issue. Then what we want to do is figure out what their goal is. We want to ask them, how awesome will it be once you achieve it? Have you thought about what would happen if you don't? And then would you be open to hearing about how we could help? And then we go ahead and transition to schedule. Super simple, right? So we implemented that into their practice. And then the next thing that we did here is we wanted to make sure that we gave them something for scheduling. Now, scheduling, in order to improve your intake call to scheduling, super simple, is we call this the rule of 2, right? We call it the rule of 2 because you only give 2 options. So we say, hey, Charles, I have Thursday or Friday. Which day works better for you? Friday. Awesome. Morning or afternoon? Afternoon. Great. And would a 11:30 or would a 2 o'clock work better for you? Let's take the 2 o'clock. Awesome. And if I put you down for 2 o'clock with Dr. So-and-so on Friday, is there anything preventing you from coming in? Right. So that's called a tie down. So the rules of 2. So what do we do there? We just give 2 options versus what most people do when we listen to call recordings, like, what days would you want to come in? What days would you want to, right? And people, right. So it's the rule of the 2. It's just like today or tomorrow, right? Tomorrow or Wednesday. Wednesday. Great. Morning or afternoon? Afternoon. Awesome. And would you rather 11:30 or 2 o'clock? Okay. 2 o'clock. And then go ahead and smooth it out. And then the last thing here is going to be arrival. Right. So we wanted to make sure that we have speed, right? We had a script for them. We had scheduling. And then we wanted to make sure we gave them something here to be able to have anticipation, some energy, right? It's just like, what can we do to get people excited? And then we wanted to make sure that we also included speed here on the back end, right? So we want to include here with speed as well. And we wanted to make sure that in order for people to arrive, the scheduling or the intake call and them arriving had to be less than 72 hours. Less than 72. And then lastly, what we did is we sent them an intake form for them to fill out beforehand, because we found that people who filled out the intake form before they arrived for their appointment had a significantly higher chance of arriving. Awesome. So here's an individual that needed 45 new patients in order to start growing here. They had a 0.16% conversion rate. And if we take those numbers here, we divide 45 divided by 0.167. They needed 269 leads. Well, the cool part about this is we were able to take their conversion rate here all the way up to about 42%, which is wild. Okay, so they had 45 new patients is what they needed. We increased their conversion rate up to 42%. So that means that they only needed 107 leads now coming into their clinic. And by the way, they were already generating that. So they already had enough leads to fill their schedule, right? This would have been chaos. This was more manageable for them. Okay. So this is a really simple way for multiple, like a lot of multiple location guys. Either they don't have the data, the scorecard, they don't have the proper setup, they don't have the staffing, they don't have the system, or they don't have the star performers running the system. And it's one of those things that we kind of look at to figure out where the main constraint is. So here's an owner thought it was more leads, but if you just turned on leads, going back into that example here, right? It looked like that. If you just turn on leads, you're going to turn on all of this flow and just hit your constraint here at your front office. And that's not going to lead to more throughput. And that's where we wanted to make sure that we remove that for the owner and put this in place. So if this resonated with you guys, something that, when you're watching this, you think it might be one issue, but it's something else, make sure you guys join our upcoming workshop. So we have a fully booked and waitlisted, right? The system to becoming oversubscribed, which by the way, like oversubscribed, there's a lot of different ways to become oversubscribed. So we will walk you from the front end of the system all the way to the back, and you'll know exactly where your bottleneck is to remove, so that all you could do right now is focus on recruiting and real estate in order to be able to grow. So if that's something interesting, click the link below and join that. But hopefully this resonated with you guys. Run your numbers, see exactly what you need, and I'll see you guys on the next video.